Right, welcome everybody to the Monday stream. Today we're going to get right into some more rendering with our Outlaw character, and we're going to potentially add some color. So let us get to it. Of course, we're going to start with some warm-up life drawing. So we're just going to load up our pose here and get to it. Got a nice background on here. I just grabbed some an image of some paper, just so that we're not drawing on just plain white. Make it a little bit more fun for ourselves. So do whatever you gotta do to make it a little bit more entertaining for yourself when you're doing warm-up life drawing stuff. You're gonna be more likely to do it at that point. So. Hey, welcome. Hope you had a nice weekend. I did. I hope you had a nice weekend. Hope everybody did. It is 2020 after all. We'll take what we can get. Okay. Excuse me. Just gonna resize some of my windows so I can actually see the chat. All right, we've got our character. Remember, I mean, this is something for some of you that have tuned in quite a bit. Sounds like I'm repeating myself, and I am. But when you start with your life drawing sessions, I mean, you think of it as just warming up, like you're going to the gym or exercising. You don't want to jump straight into your hardcore bench press or squats or whatever it is you do, right? Or sprinting, right? You want to kind of warm up, get the joints moving. And so with that in mind, you know, I'm just going to try and keep the gestures really loose, very limited in time. So, and it's always good to kind of hold your pen sort of at a little bit of a distance there. So I'll get a bit closer here. So for me, again, I focus on not being too precious about the drawings themselves. So I've got the canvas selected, so I can just hit delete when I want to create a new piece. And I find if you do it that way, you're way less likely to start noodling detail, and you're way more able to just be free with the sketching, right? And so this model is leaning backwards against a ball and sort of exercise ball, so I can kind of start to capture that and just really feel that shoulder and some of those gestures in there. I'll rotate the pose just a little bit and start kind of getting in maybe just a slightly different pose on the body there. And I find with this kind of gestural drawing, you just get some really beautiful shapes. I mean, sometimes it's even abstract, but that's not a bad thing. Well, it depends on who you are. I prefer, I guess I wouldn't even say I prefer. I just really like gestural, energetic painting and line drawing in that case. My head's kind of facing back that way. It's really nice and loose. This brush is really nice for it as well. We'll try and get her from the side here. You can have a lot of fun with it as well. You can exaggerate, right? I'm observing, so I'm still paying attention to how things are working, but sometimes you can really kind of have some fun with it. start a new one. Let's go with a different pose. Or maybe we'll try from the back. It'll be a little bit of a weird one. Kind of draw that exercise ball. Her head's kind of leaning back on it. Got those shoulders out to the side. Elbows out. It's going to be a very strange shape. And through that exercise ball, we can see sort of her spine, pelvis in there. Her nose sticking out of the top. So my brush is really big, and I can't make a nose. And that's what's kind of nice about it is I literally cannot sit there and noodle with the detail because the brush isn't set up for it, right? So I have to be a lot more impressionistic about the things that I'm seeing for her, right? But that would be her kind of sitting against the ball. And you see her legs kind of come out to the side there. Very crazy foreshorten. Just gonna maybe take a look at the hands in there. Zoom in on them. It's gonna be a lot more easy to draw a hand at this point because I'm not physically zooming into the piece. I'm just looking closer at that stuff. So I'm gonna have an easier time than I would have if I was trying to draw the full body. So if you're not following along, I mean, I recommend to do it, right? Because what we're trying to do is create good, good habits of warming up, the strategies around kind of getting better at observation and translation of things, right? So it's always good to get that practice in there. I do love this brush quite a bit. Let's turn that off. Let's go find ourselves a different pose. Model's doing a weird thing with her feet where she's her body where she's kind of hanging onto this pole in a very strange way. I don't know contextually how that would be useful in maybe a drawing, but why not, hey? I can draw really long flowing hair. This model doesn't have that, but I almost want to just use that brush to mark make. Let's change the pose a little bit. I'm gonna slow down a little bit here. Make my brush a bit smaller. Now I can be a bit more beholden to what's happening with the body. Really trying to limit moving my fingers at all, and my wrist when I'm working with this stuff, to really try and train that arm to getting that gesture. Once you kind of start to get a flow with it as well, it feels good. I mean, try it out. Sometimes we do need to kind of get in there and be very mechanical about drawing all of those things, obviously, but I mean, how often do you really focus on kind of creating a connection between that shoulder and the mind's eye? My habit is definitely to start getting the details in there. As a concept artist, I mean, time is of the essence always, and so sometimes you just want to get into it and start kind of getting to the work, right? We're going to be doing that with the Outlaw, pose soon enough. Don't worry. I'm doing a bit of a shorter warm-up today because I do want to get some mileage on it, on the illustration, but we'll see that happen in a few minutes. Not bad. Let's work on this one. Change that pose up a little bit more. Go for something nice and clear. For some exaggeration here. You can get some really cool illustrations going out of this if you're not trying to hang on to the verisimilitude for a piece. Right? You can, really practice. And stylization does come from this idea where you're kind of taking something and bending it a little bit to your will. I keep drawing off the frame there. Having fun observing what it is you're seeing, and then shifting it, changing it so that it's whatever you want it to be. And that's the other aspect of kind of not being so hard on yourself about whether or not you get things perfectly aligned or anything like that in your warm-ups, is that you don't have to. Nobody's waiting for the illustration to land. You're not maybe taking it too seriously either, and where you're kind of second guessing yourself, right? So maybe just a really nice way to investigate some cool shapes with her. So that's kind of fun. Any of the muscles that we might see. So that's a pretty fun one. Let's turn that a little bit around here. Get into the face a little bit. Similarly, just, you know, pick up some fun shapes in here and trying to keep my stroke economy pretty lean as well at the same time, where I'm not trying to do the sort of hairy line thing where I'm trying to figure out which line I'm trying to produce. I'm taking a look at my reference and I'm just trying to tag it with the right kind of line. And again, if we're practicing, I mean, who cares if we hit it? I mean, ultimately we care, but we're not being so, again, precious about it. So just get some nice cheekbones. Maybe move that ear out a little bit more for her and have some of that hair sweep out. We don't need a million lines to figure out that she has a hairline. You can use kind of tangents, and I keep pulling that loose. Super annoying. Just kind of span up this way a bit. Kind of target where those things will go, right? Just go sternocleidomastoid, this big muscle in here when you turn your neck, that bad boy. Sternocleidomastoid, very strange name, because that moves into her shoulder. I can slow it down a little bit here and focus on some of the details a little bit. Now that I've warmed up. Just got nice dark hair. I can try with this brush and produce a lean stroke economy while trying to speak to the way her hair kind of meets at the hairline. that nose a little bit. Gotta multiply on my brush. I might go with just a normal. If I were to start kind of blocking in some lighting on her. I'm kind of liking the starkness though of the lines and the simplicity of these things in there. So I might keep it small for now. Conversely, you could go in with an eraser, kind of tighten up some lines if you wanted. This depends, right? Like if you wanted to kind of keep some of the, well, keep the brush as the only sort of mark making aesthetic in there, then I probably wouldn't do this, right? But that's the awesome part about this. You can do whatever you like. Get a little bit more of that hair coming out this way. So I think that, you know, something like that could work really nicely. We could always move that down, but I'll just leave it there. Right, again, not being too precious about things. So got a few fun things going on in terms of warming up. So let's transition to the piece now so we can get some of that work done. So let's just, let's go over here. So this is sort of where we left it last time, and I was starting to block in some background stuff, and yeah, so I think that we're at a good stage. The line work is a little heavy and dark, to be honest, and something that I started to do was collapse everything into one layer, but I did reserve the line work on a separate layer, so I can pop that back on. We can see that it's sort of, you can detect that it's being turned on there. So the nice thing about that is we have all of that line layer sitting on top of our character, and I can lock the pixels with this little checkerboard button. So that's an alpha lock, and that'll lock out anything that's clear or has some level of alpha to it, so that we can just isolate whatever's pixel, right? Anything that where there's no pixel information will not be affected. So if you kind of paint with a transparency on a layer, alpha locking it will still consider that a pixel, and it will only apply your paint over top of it in the same sort of alpha sort of clarity that you would see in the original painting. So if something is half see-through, then you're going to paint into it and it'll still be half see-through. So you got to be careful, right? If you don't want that to be the case, then you have to go in and erase those pixels so they're not there. Otherwise, the alpha lock will continue to use that. So we've got that there. If we run into that with this piece, I'll fix it as we go. But so I've got that. I'm going to switch my brush from that beautiful line drawing brush. I'm going to go back into some of our more rudimentary brushes. So like an airbrush, simple round airbrush. You can see it there. And I can go in here and start kind of knocking out some of those lines. So in her face, you know, like say the scratches on her face, I don't want those to be super aggressive, so make sure your blend mode is back to normal. So I can paint those down by quite a bit. But some of the lines might be really good for us to be using a shadow, right? Or at least the start of a shadow. By the end of this, I am going to collapse this down again. So just as an aside, I've created yet another layer of the original just in case I screw things up. So let's get in there and start matching some of these lines to maybe some of the values that are around them a little bit more. So what you're going to see is like they're going to effectively disappear a bit. And I can elect to do that in a way that's very harsh or very minimal, depending on the effect that I'm after. So with the coat, it's a bit aggressive, so I'm just going to go in there and kind of move those back to something that's still dark, but it's not black. So again, I want to reserve that black value for my deepest, darkest shadows. I'm just going to be careful that I don't kind of paint these out to a point where I can't detect them anymore. Her skin, definitely be something I move back. Some of them, not all of them. Wherever I think the shadow is going to be more necessary, I'll leave it. The outside of the shoulder, definitely gonna nuke that. With a lot of this, it's just a guide, right? So as long as you can detect it at all, you're going to be okay, right? And I'm still got it on its own layer, so if I feel like that ever becomes an issue before I collapse everything, I can go and tweak certain areas. I'm not too worried about these things though. The top of the shirt's a good example, as I don't want that to be dark at all. Just a delineation of the edge of the fabric, right? The glove is a dark element, so it'll probably have some pretty intense shadow. The saddle, not so much. The stuff back here, the horse tail might be something that's a lot lighter. You can really sometimes just get this to completely disappear depending on what you want. It's hard sometimes to do this though, because you think you're like losing your line work, but again, because we have it set up in a layer right now, if you're terrified of that happening, you can always paint it darker before you go further. Again, I'm not too worried about it. We've reserved this guy to save our lives if that ever becomes an issue. And this one's also gonna, the top line layer is also gonna provide us with a blueprint to just fall back to, maybe if we do really start to kind of collapse these lines, in case we forget how something worked once we kind of meld it all together. We can just look back, which is really nice. This back here. Feathers. Okay. Not bad. Let's go take the bite out of some of these once again. And let's collapse that. Okay, so this is our new drawing. If I need this again, I have it, but at least we've got to that point with it here. So come in here. Got a bit of a smudge brush going on. And now I can kind of take down some of these intense edges of those lines and just start to kind of amalgamate them in. So like with the scarring, I can start to eliminate the edges. Make it feel maybe it's a bit blurry. If it gets too blurry, you know, cut it back in with a brush. So when you make a airbrush really small, the edge of the brush is still fuzzy. It can create a firmer edge though by doing that instead of going straight to a hard edge brush. If that's not the effect you're looking for. I don't want it to be super rigid and sharp, at least in this detail, so that's why I just made it small there. Go through maybe some of that skin as it's healed is a bit more kind of polished. You'll notice that with scars sometimes, is like as it heals, it's almost like this polished look to the flesh. So, depending on the scar, hers are. Nice thing about this is I don't have to even blend things. I can just go in and hand paint, which is also really nice. I can tighten up some of those edges. We can get back in there with some blending. Howdy. It's going well. How are you doing, Jan? Let's get some of that going on. That little sort of pucker at the edge of the lips going. That's a nice one to smooth out. See, some of my original line work and brush work in here is still pretty rough, right? So that's just what I'm taking time with and going in and cleaning up. Her nostrils a little bit sort of generalized in there as well, so I can kind of come back in here and cut it in. Bit of that light falling on her eyelid because we want her eye lit up, right? So I'll maybe crawl a little bit of that light source up a little bit higher on her head in there. You don't even have to do that much to start to really feel the effect of kind of getting into that render phase using that method. There's many methods to render with, you know. So. Hello. I'm buffering. Doing okay, just did some gesture sketches. Awesome. That's what we want to be doing on our Mondays. Well, depending on where you are in the world. Maybe it's Tuesday if you're in the East. I have some Australian students time to time, so it can be a little bit confusing. sometimes to make sure everybody's on the same page in terms of what time it is or what time we're meeting and that kind of thing. But I can start to get a little bit of a rim light over here. I'm sure everyone in here has seen rim lighting. It's on almost everything in terms of illustrative work. It's good to know why people do that, right? I mean, it's a dramatic way of lighting an object, but the function of it, a lot of the time, or one of the functions may be, is that it pulls shapes out of the darkness, right? If her ear shadow is getting pretty dark against her hair, and I lose her ear shape, then I can't see the ear shape. And so, you know, it might be a good thing to pull that out in your lighting, right? Same as her jaw in here. So if I start to kind of bring in a lot of rim light there, I would want to support it also with shadow. Otherwise, it's just going to be light on top of light, and you're not going to be able to actually see the difference in the contour of the volumes, right? And so you do want to support rim lighting with shadow as well. So if you're going to bring it in, just make sure that you allow for some shadow to fall off. And it might mean you have to move your lights around, or it may mean that it's not going to be a great time to put your rim light in there. Sometimes you don't always get to, in every situation, get to fall back on conventions. This depends on what the client wants. So I'm going to use the lines that we laid down in the line drawing for an indicator of where my rear light should come from. All right, have that wrap around her head. Some of this stuff in here I'll actually make it a little bit darker because it's in behind the hat, maybe not getting a ton of rim light in there. But again, I can start to kind of blend those in. Might be good to, at this point, to get in there with a little bit of our smudge tool, just to take the inner edge off of some of those lines. And sometimes the way I'm painting this, I'll pick up new lines, I'll make new lines if I feel like it's a better call, right? The original lines I put in there were a good call for the time, right? But as I get kind of closer to some of these elements, it may be better for me to rework them if I think something else will look more believable or create advantages elsewhere in the drawing or whatever. Same thing over here, just using some of that line work to just guide me. actually try and cut that brim a little bit closer to her head. A little bit big. Or maybe not big enough on this side. It may mean I have to kind of bring this brim out this way, which in this case I can do because, you know, it's up to me to make that shift if it's if we're feeling like the perspective's not working real well. So this background is secondary. I can even work in there with the cigarette smoke and whatnot, right? What's the most common mistake I see my students do? Well, I would say the most common mistake would be, one of the most common mistakes is expectations. A lot of people, I mean, let's just kind of think about how you're set up in grade school with progression and things. So you learn how to do something one way and you know how to do it. Therefore, you kind of get signed off on. You know, I know how to do long division, right? For instance. And so you go up through school and even in art classes in school, doing artwork in and of itself, the act of creation is sort of a lot of the times good enough, right? And so it gets conflated that if I go to an art school, that all I do is pay for, you know, the program, and I come out the other side suddenly now competitive, right? There are things in the world that you can get certifications for sure. Where you come out the other side, you know how to do the thing, right? But in the arts, it's a little bit different, right? And so there, you know, you can be to just look at it outside of painting and drawing, concept art. If somebody teaches you how to dance, right, or they teach you a dance, you can know how to waltz or whatever the heck, right? Whatever the dance is. Maybe it's ballroom dancing, I don't know. But you'll have to practice that so much for you to ever get good enough for somebody to pay to see you dance, right? For instance, music, art, photography. Photography is a good one. You can buy a camera. You can kind of have a crash course on how to shoot and still not be very good at it. It'll take tons of practice, right? So it's the expectation to know that there's a lot of mileage that needs to be put in outside of knowing what to do, right? And so I see students get frustrated with the fact that the people they look towards, some of their favorite artists, are up here and they're way down here, and that they just want to be where they are, right? But those people are up there because they've practiced for years and, you know, done it in a way that's correct, right? So I would say that's the biggest thing, to be honest, because if you understand that and you go through training and you set yourself up to go in the right direction and you just continue to do these things, you're going to be successful eventually. Some people will catch on to it a little bit faster. Everybody's different in the way they learn, the way they practice, how much passion they have for it, how much energy they put in. Right, and so of course there's going to be a spectrum of people going faster or slower, right? but it, you know, you'll get better at anything if you sit down and kind of take it on and learn and practice for a while, right? That's why people are good at sports. I mean, if you're playing baseball every day as a kid, practicing and trying to do better every day, by the time you're a young adult and you want to try out for a team, you're way more likely to get it than somebody that's picked it up in a year, right? And then just kind of tries really hard for a year. Whereas that other person's just, it's second nature to them, right? They're looking at the complexities of way more advanced elements of whatever vocation they're in, so they're way ahead, right? So it has to be something you think about, right? No matter what you do. I mean, you could say this, I think, for almost anything. If you wanted to be an accountant, the reason why the people are partners at an accountant firm are because they have all of that experience, that time, the know-how, right? So that's a really long answer to your question. Technically, in terms of actually drawing and painting, one of the mistakes that I see a lot is people don't tend to have patience to observe and really break down what it is they're seeing, and then try and figure out a way to translate that to mark making or painting, right? People just want to, a lot of the times, like 3D tools and these other things seem really great because then you don't have to practice that stuff. Those things are more of like a technical advantage when you're trying to get work done, and for commercial artists it's a big deal to get work done in time. And if you can bump your quality up to fit more of your attention into the details and making it look beautiful, because those visual aids can help you get there, then that's what's great about it. But as a student, if you kind of just get in there and start leaning on all these crutches, it's going to be a bad time whenever those crutches fail, right? So there are actually people that join the program make you a better artist. It's silly. Well, I mean, I guess you could say it's silly. I think it's, like I said before, I think in certain parts of life, people aren't set up with sort of the reality check of those things, right? So you just may be misinformed about those things. So and for some people also, I would say that you like art making in a certain way, right? A certain methodology, your way, right? And you think you might want to get into it, and then you realize, okay, there's workflows and conditions where you have to, especially as a commercial artist, you have to work with and collaborate with a client. And that may not be at the forefront of your mind when you're thinking about, oh, hey, I like to do this, therefore I'm going to make a career out of it. And then you just really don't know what that actually means, right? So that could be it as well. So, and of course, there's always going to be people that just haven't looked into it. So, yeah. So let's kind of turn this off real quick. I'm just going to use my eraser to kind of cut in some edges in here at her eye. And I imagine this woman as being kind of one of the Vanderlyn gang from, Red Dead. Maybe something that's way more calm and collected. From this, I'm just going to use my marquee selection tool, kind of create some smoke shapes. I'm going to do them on a different layer and then maybe erase the original line work there. Because again, it's just like a good a good basic build for what I was thinking. So I'll do something like that, then I'll go underneath and I'll just hit up my eraser. Let's get rid of it. Yeah, I mean, in terms of just kind of thinking about growing up loving art and wanting to do it for a job, I found even like when I was going through school, there wasn't much support at all to be painting and drawing for a living, like illustration, right? I mean, I remember looking through placements in high school for like job placements and jobs in general for illustration. It would always end up being graphic design, right, as a commercial art. So it was always disheartening to me, and teachers would be guiding you more towards traditional vocations, which was frustrating. But I didn't listen to any of it, and I kept going. But it's just interesting how everybody needs artwork. It's just that it's not art. I think some people just have a hard time considering art as an actual job. Maybe because you started out and it's fun and it's just, idiosyncratic. It's about you, and some people that may appeal to people and may not, right? So it's interesting. Psychology of it all. Let's get rid of that dark line at the base. Actually, we'll maybe make it a bit darker. I want her face to stand out from the back of the hat. Maybe a little bit of her face will help be a tiny bit of a reflect. I'm gonna start using a mask here because I don't want to get too messy with it. Switch brushes to something a bit more hard round. Don't know why, but I never saw art as an actual viable option. As a career, as a child, or even as a young student, that all came in the last few years. I'd like to draw back then more than anything. Kind of gave it up in your teenage years and picked it up again now. Yeah, I mean, I think there's reasons for that, right? And it's, if you're not into it, I imagine it's very difficult to try and convince somebody to get into it, because maybe that you lack understanding of it as as sort of like a grade school teacher or career counselor, or as a parent even, right? When you think of art, sometimes the tendency is to think of fine art, which is very idiosyncratic and can be very political and divisive. depending on what it is. It could be boring, right, if it's not your thing. So, you know, if you were trying to set someone up with a good chance at making it out there, it may seem to be something that's just more of a risky venture that doesn't apply too much. But the reality is it applies to a lot. And I've really seen, since I've become a concept artist, since the early 2000s, it's picked up huge. More and more people want to do it. I think the internet helps with that, right? Being able to see other people's artwork, share artwork, now work remotely, right? So turn on some smoothing here just because I'm kind of needing that little bit of a flow. I'll grab a bit of a pinched brush. Wish I could nip my younger self in the butt. Could have been so much better by now. Oh well. The only thing I can do now is practice. Yeah, I mean, I can't. I'd be butchering the saying, but saying goes something like the best time to have started was 10 years ago, or whatever, how many years ago. The second best time is now, right? So you can get really far if you put your nose to the grindstone. Stone, not stone. I think that's just it, though. It's like effort. It does take effort. It takes kind of commitment. And the people that quit, you know, they don't just never see where it could go. And so, plus, it's not like you're digging ditches as a concept artist. So you'll be able to do it well into your old age. If not concept art, then maybe it's more just illustration, right? That's the other cool thing about this ability to paint and draw things, is you can help people with a lot of different artwork. You can create your own artwork, right? And have people come and visit your website and pay money to see what you do, or you produce designs for t-shirts or hats, or you know, you do illustration for books or websites, logo design, that kind of thing. So there's lots of opportunity to make it work in different industries. Go through here, and I'm just kind of picking up things. Cleaning up some of this stuff. When I'm doing a piece, especially if I'm working on my own and I don't have like a crazy deadline, I do like to kind of move around and maybe do some detailing work, clean up an area here or there, move back to some detailing work, just to work in different areas of the painting. I tend to want to focus on making sure that I have even passes though, right? So don't get into the trap of only kind of what you've been seeing me do so far is just work on the face. Right, so I'm switching it up a little bit here and moving away from that for a bit. The other side effect of kind of switching that up is that you'll also maybe the next time you go and look at it, you'll have a little bit, at least a little bit more of a fresh eye for how it's going. And then maybe you can make some impactful changes if you've been kind of stumbling on anything. Something else that I'll do, especially if I'm working in a studio, is if I know that I have multiple assets to work on, sometimes I'll start the next one as a way of breaking up, you know, resting my eyes on a piece, and that way I can come back to that other piece and have had a visual break from it, which has helped me many times kind of work through some issues, because you can get kind of blind to a piece if you've worked on it long enough, and you just start kind of just trusting yourself just because you've made the artwork. You'd be like, yeah, okay, this is what I meant, I think. So it's a nice side effect. We'll clean up some of that stuff as well. Clean up this shoulder. I really kind of want to work on this arm now. It's a bit hazy, bumpy. How long will you be streaming today? I'm streaming until for another about 41 minutes. And then I'll be back on Thursday. So my streams are only a couple hours long. So I've got plenty of other things to do in a day, but it's always fun to kind of come in here for me, even just to get that practice down, right? But to be able to kind of interface with you guys and hang out. This brush is going a little bit slow. I'm going to switch to an airbrush and just kind of start blending that stuff in a bit faster. Had to let go of the alpha lock there because there was some transparency that I had to paint out. Just be careful when you're doing that. I can always clean up the edges anyway with a mask, so it's not a huge deal. Honestly, these streams are a perfect way to start my Monday. Gets my butt into gear. Excellent. That's what I like to hear. It is a good way to just kind of set yourself up for success for the rest of the week. Making sure that we warm up though. My smoothing was set to high. That's why I was having a struggle there. To be honest, smoothing in Photoshop to me is new. It has not been there for a majority of the time that I've used Photoshop. It's been there for a while now, but the workflow for me is newer because I don't tend to use that in this. So here's an example of me just kind of figuring out if I want this thing to look a certain way. I kind of want this embroidered fiber on these little strands going across the jacket. And sometimes I'll just take a minute to see if I like sort of even a sketchy look at that. So I do. I think I've got a sense of what I'll do with that. So sometimes it's good to play. It's always good to play. Experiment. We can make it more serious if we want. Experiment to see what would be good. Maybe that's why people don't tend to push art as a career, is because it sounds like it's too much fun, and it is. I mean, there's some stresses involved, don't get me wrong, but I've worked in -20 weather, digging ditches, literally digging ditches for electrical stuff, and trying to pull wire through wood that's frozen solid, and I've done some jobs where I didn't love it for sure. This beats them all, hands down. I want her to have some pipes though. I want to feel kind of, I still want her to feel like, you know, average feminine, well, not average feminine build, but feminine and less hypertrophic, but I still want her to feel like she's got some guns on her. So just kind of trying to get the bicep looking pretty good in there. I might soften that a hair, but see, that's engaged. Feeling a bit better. The other arm needs some loving. There might be a little bit of a light that comes up from underneath that might highlight a bit of the bicep in there, but it would also highlight the tricep. See the backside there. I need to turn this off quick just to get rid of some of those gaps that I'm seeing through the base of that. Make sure that's tied up. Then I can turn that back on. So we can get a bit of that rim, at least that like kick light. Well, that'd be more of a rim light kind of coming in through here. Definitely using those shadows to help sustain the volume. That's a little bit bright. Whoops. I kind of want to just soften some of the stuff up and not get too trapped in lots of rendering yet. Just want the tubular volumes to read better. Then I can come back a little bit later with some more details. I think that was meant to be the armpit in there. I'll get some highlight at the top of the deltoid there. See, you'll see the smaller I make this, the sharper that line seems, right? It's still all just an airbrush though. Take a step back. Yeah, she's starting to feel like she's got some pipes on her. I may soften that by the end a little bit, but I'm sculpting at this point, right? So let's deal with a little bit of the old dark lines in here. I don't love those. I'm going to turn the alpha lock off. I'm just going to kind of commit some of the values where they need to go. I want the top of it to be an edge, but it's really thick the way I originally drew it. That's not a huge deal though, because I can kind of come in here and knock that down big time. I'm going to run it to the outside edge there because I don't want to have to repaint part of her clavicle, so I can do that. I would just run the furrow a little bit deeper, like so. The ruffle, I guess I should say. Not hip to the beat on some of the fashion design lingo. I might clean this up a little bit later with a brush smoothing. I'm kind of just trying to model the volumes of it first. But the lines I laid down originally are really good for me to be using as just a guide, right? Hey, how are you doing? Hey, sure you remember I'm from Germany. I'm Vicky. I do remember you. How did that internship go? Yeah, it's been that long. Wow, 2 to 3 years ago. Crazy. Yeah, I'm super curious on how that internship went. It sounded a little bit strange from the outset, but hopefully it worked for you. Gonna get some of those really deep shadows down at the kind of base of her neck and then have that pop up a little bit more. since the light's coming kind of down above her head, you know, the furrows, think about kind of just having something cast shadow, right, as a basic sort of volume. And then, you know, some of the stuff underneath her collar will start to kind of cast that shadow. There'll be longer, stranger shadows, because if that light's really far above head, then, or far overhead, it won't be kind of projected from the camera, right? So sort of where my mind's at with it. And so there's going to be some shadow in there. Of course, I'm going to get a little bit of that rim light flowing in over top. This is the reflection. Well, we'll start with kind of the basic lighting on the vest. Thinking about where that light will strike. Let's push some of the shoulder reflection over a little bit. So something with her muscularity that I might do in terms of, you know, in the spirit of what we're doing here on the Monday life drawing sessions is to actually go and find some reference of the right kind of muscularity that I'm thinking, or maybe I don't even know that yet. And I'll have to go out and sort of see what feels good for my character, right? Because for her, I want her to seem like she's a little bit more muscular than an average female physiology, but I also don't want to make her look like a bodybuilder, right? So sort of more athletic than anything. So I think about that stuff, athletic, female, and then I can go and I can look at deltoid, right? And try and find that online. Some of the times when you guys are searching for this stuff, you have to be a bit more creative about your search terms and think about where on the internet you'd find a lot of pictures of muscular feminine deltoids. So maybe you look for female workouts, shoulder exercises, right? You're gonna have somebody working out and they're engaging those muscle fibers, and then maybe you'll see some lighting fall on that. Especially if people are trying to sell sort of workout stuff, they're gonna maybe be lighting things really nice. So that kind of thing, right? So thinking about how that works. Still waiting to hear back from you, Vicky. See how your internship was. I'm going to erase the top of shoulder, but I'm basically doing that in my mask, right? So in case I want some of that art back, masking's good because you don't destroy anything. Have the edge be a little bit torn up though, so let's go through and kind of make that look like roughed up cut leather. Maybe this was a jacket and she kind of took it apart. It's a bit rougher. On the edge, oh really? The auto mod. Fortunately we have to use that because we don't have any moderators. Maybe if the channel or the stream gets bigger and bigger, we'll have mods, so sorry about that. Yeah, really fun, crazy hours, learned a lot. Awesome. Sounds about right. Yeah, you work a lot of hours in entertainment art just because it's very expensive to produce everything, right? Apps, video games on mobile, console games for sure, PC games as well, TV shows, films. So people don't tend to spend increasing amounts of money every year, so you have to kind of bid on projects and hope that you can afford to make it. So I'm going to throw my smoothing back on. Oh, you're able to go back to Frankfurt. That's awesome. Because it was Pixamondo that you went to before, right? From my memory, I feel like that was where you're going in China. So starting to get some detail in there, right? That's looking good. Catching myself, making sure I don't go too far down the rabbit hole with that, and getting back to some of the other details that I wanted to kind of produce on the volumes that we're still roughing out, right? So I'm painting over some of these details because I'm crazy like that, right? No, I'm confident with where I want to go with it, so I'm not too worried about losing anything at this point, right? And I need the kind of volumes to work for me first and foremost before the details. So if I need them back, I got that line layer, right? Good memory. Well, for some things. Other things, no. Let's turn that off. Well, it's really cool, Vicky, that you were able to make that transition over, because, I mean, that's a good example of a situation where experience can get you to the places you want to be. So that's great. Super stoked. I might, our marketing manager, Nadia, is always interested in stories from students in the industry. So I might pass on your information to her, if you don't mind, so she can contact you. She's given a few interviews to different people, different students of mine that have gone on to work in the industry, or other students from the school. It's always good for new students to hear about successes like yours. So let me know. So I'm trying to get the, like, up in beside her arm, it's going to be fairly dark because of occlusion, right? And up under this, depending on sort of like the way the breast mass is going to kind of deal with the leather. I mean, now that I'm thinking of it, it'll probably actually span down a little less harsh, because leather's not going to bend, say, like cottonwood. It's not going to kind of crease around an armpit, for instance, like cottonwood. So it's going to be a bit more rigid. So we would probably expect to not have a very severe line there in terms of that mass, right? And that's why we're doing the life drawing, is we're trying to figure out and start to understand some of those masses. But it's not always just about the nude figure, right? To understand the anatomy, absolutely it is, but at some points we actually move on to looking at the skin, hair, things that go over top, like costume elements, right? So that is another thing that you can learn from life, and so, you know, it might be advantageous for me to go and find a vest that works really well for me to understand sort of how that will conform to this female figure. I'm going to use the old brain box to imagine that being something where the leather's stiffer and it's not going to conform a ton. So, sure, go ahead. All right. Working on some cool projects. One of them is Carnival Row. Not sure if I've heard of that. No, I haven't actually. What is that about? So let's just go in and I'm gonna just blast this detail in here because we're going to just use the edges, right? So I just need to kind of get rid of that stuff for now. Make that a little bit tighter. Okay, I'm just gonna kind of track to that edge. Turn this corner here, move down that way. Turn this corner here and move up that way. Down here. Oh, cool. That sounds fun. A fey creature. I don't know what that is, to be honest. I feel like I should know. Like fairies and satyrs and stuff like that. Oh, okay. I'll have to definitely check that out. You must be happy to be done with the university as well. I think you're not going anymore, I would assume. So mapping each one of these frills with some light, and the way I'm thinking of it is I'm using in my mind's eye, a cylinder to kind of think about how that light would roll over a surface like this. Now it'd be a cylinder that's sort of been kind of unwoven or opened up, and so it's not quite a cylinder, right? But in terms of where my mind's going with these kinds of things, it would be more cylinder-like. I can think about maybe putting like a detail up on top that's maybe lighter. Overall, that might be actually pretty cool. So then I could preserve the sort of lighter values all the way down as a detail. And then I could just endeavor to include some stitching so that it does look like an element where everything's lighter. So let's go clean up some of this other side to prep that for some of what we're doing here. In terms of the way these furls are happening, on her left, our screen right, the furls aren't happening. They're happening in the frequency that's faster than what's happening with her right, our left screen, this stuff over here. So I would want to be savvy to that, and so I might actually just relax this a little bit and then have that come up that way, just so that they feel a little bit closer to one another. And that I'm not just, because I drew it the first time and didn't pay close attention to that I'm just gonna follow suit because that's what I drew, right? Even when I'm making stuff for clients that way, if I know that it makes sense to change, then I'll just do it. It does depend on your relationship with your clients. Sometimes that's that might be overstepping your bounds if they've signed off on anything, right? So just be aware of that. But I feel like for her, it's going to be a good call for us. Is the dream? Yeah, it is. Despite the doubts, hey? And the difficulties. Able to do it. Let's get rid of some of these darker values in here now. Knowledge of anatomy is still lacking quite a bit, so having your stream on while drawing is really nice. You explain everything regarding anatomy so well. Well, thank you very much. I try. And that's all you can do. No, it's something that I think, in my experience, has been just something that every artist practices quite regularly. So, yeah. It is the more you get into the nuance of the elements of anatomy, the better you get at art. You focus on those nuances, the more complex they are, right? If you want to create more and more believable work, right? So it does take the efforts. Cool to have my students, both present and past, and maybe future students in here. And if not my students, some of the other mentors. We got some great mentors teaching now for the school as I'm doing a lot more kind of administrative stuff as the head of department. But now we've got some awesome artists. I'm just going to use an airbrush here because that's a bit annoying to deal with. I think with these marks up here is intending them to be a little bit of like a pectoral striation, the muscle. I don't want them to be too present. In fact, I might kind of just freewheel without them. I'm loving the shapes of those. And her clavicle does seem to be a bit monstrous, so let's paint that down a little bit. But she's not looking too bad, especially kind of where we were at with her. Right. Kind of cut in from some of the line work that looked more like this to this now, right? So feeling pretty good. We could have like maybe she's been in knife fights and stuff like that. I mean the scar damage could kind of travel down into the chest region from the cougar fight that she had, or mountain lion fight that she had. Some of the scarring is maybe a bit aggressive. I actually might kind of tune it down a little bit into lighter, have some of it almost fade off instead of being like super dark. Thing is with people, like we're very quickly able to kind of discern that somebody's had scars. So we stare at faces a lot all day, so it can be very kind of subdued in there, I think, and not detract. Like I want some of her features to be kind of very moody and dark. Like I'm giving her kind of darker eye makeup. Almost like theatrical makeup, right? So like if she were to walk into a saloon and a bunch of tough guys got up to threaten her, she'd look badass, staring right back in the face. With the brooding eyes. She could have tattoos. That's definitely something I would use a reference for. Partially because I don't want to just give her sleeve tattoos like you'd see people do now, right? If she's from an era of tattoo design, then you want to kind of bring some of the aesthetics from that era into the tattoos, because that's probably what she would have, right? Instead of sort of like a koi tattoo that runs down her arm, or I mean, what else? A lot of sort of Japanese vibe to the tattoos that you see in a lot of Western tattooing. But that's what I'd be thinking about. A lot of that's something else that I tell my students all the time. Is like, don't accidentally end up on something looking good. Aim for something and try to achieve that, so you have a little bit more agency over what you're building, right? It's always going to be better for you. So her chest is kind of turning a little bit towards us. Her hips are turning away a little bit. So I've just got to watch the center line, right? So let's grab a red so that we can detect that. And you guys can do this every time in your own artwork, right? Is go and run a center line down your character's body. So this is where it starts to, her head's definitely turned more to screen right. When we get to the chest, if we're using sort of the well of the cleavage as a midpoint, right, then that would be the center point, right? And then anything standing off the body, any masses like muscles or say the breast tissue there, it would have to come off in perspective, right? So you don't want it to be like you're accidentally starting to draw everything flat projected to the screen, because that's how you're used to drawing characters, right? You want to think about that center line. So I'm kind of watching it as I'm painting it. I'm realizing that the distance between the edge of the furrow here and that center line here is quite a lot bigger than this in here, right? And so that's easy enough for me to see. So if I'm able to pay attention to that, I can fix it, right? And so that's why you would do this kind of thing. And you can kind of imagine, like, forget that mass, and we're just looking, we're kind of looking through it to her rib cage, to the end of the sternum. We're thinking about that sternum maybe ending somewhere around here, and then you get the kind of costal arch on both sides there. So that would continue down the abductors, down into the pelvic bone in there. So that's not looking too bad. The torsion that we're seeing around this side is feeling all right, but I do have to fix the chest region to make sure it's on point. And you'll see this all the time. Like, you'll be watching your favorite artists, maybe a time lapse of what they're doing, and you'll see them painting, and then you'll see them lasso something and start to move it around, right? That's because they've done a similar thing. It's like they painted it, it looked good and rough, but when they get into the details, they've noticed that this needs to be shifted a little bit this way, a little bit that way. That's normal, right? You know, there'll be people like Kim Jong-gi, who is just like nails it. I mean, that guy's an example of somebody his visualization process through practice has got him to a level of like master. Like, he's a master if there ever was one of drawing, I think. Safe to say. But that's what he's doing. So, so what to do with the shifting of that, right? Well, let's go down to this, and let's lasso that area. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy paste it, and then I'm going to use my transform tool to kind of position it properly, right? And I'm gonna, or maybe I can kind of get it moving over into the center of the mass a little bit more, so that the difference between each side of the furrow isn't as noticeable. Let's take a look at like kind of shifting it over. That's not too bad. The perspective feels like it's working on the volumes. Feels better, right? There's a little bit like I can finesse some of the edges now. That's just what we need to do on the regular, right? So we can kind of follow this edge around a little bit, and then the span of the shirt will be in between that. We think that the center line of that would be over top, right? So we can envision that. Again, if you don't have an idea of muscles and volumes on somebody, don't guess your way through it. Go and look and learn, right? So that's going to be the color, but that's okay, because we're just cruising with this, right? We're working through the development of it and getting it further. And so, yeah, we've just been able to kind of integrate a little bit more of what she's doing there. And she's looking good. I think she's looking like a badass. So, so hopefully you guys have followed along and you're doing your own artwork. That'd be awesome. We'll see you later, Vicky. It's been a good stream. So we'll be back on Thursday. We started to edge in some color on our alien containers, so I think we're going to spend the whole stream on that, just wrapping that up, at least in a nice kind of first pass on polish. So join me then. Otherwise, have a great Monday. Thanks for showing up to the stream. I really appreciate you guys hanging out, and we will see everyone next time. Take care, everyone.